Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. In both our Old Testament and New Testament reading, we read about a temple in which there are offerings and sacrifices taking place. In regards to Ezekiel and the temple that he saw, the people were to offer up the various offerings and sacrifices that are laid out in Ezekiel chapter 45 and 46. And again, these are in connection to this temple that Ezekiel saw. But in 1 Peter chapter 2, we also have a temple, what Peter calls a spiritual house, in which spiritual sacrifices are offered up to God. This is brought out in 1 Peter chapter 2, starting in verse 4, where it says, "And coming to him as to a living stone, which has been rejected by men, but is choice and precious in the sight of God. You also, as living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house for a holy priesthood to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ." And so there we find some similarities between the church, which has Christ as its cornerstone, and the individuals connected to the cornerstone as living stones themselves being built up into a spiritual house, with the sacrifices being offered. So sounds very similar to the temple that Ezekiel saw. But this is a spiritual house with spiritual sacrifices. And these are the sacrifices that we should be offering up to God each and every day. As we read in Ezekiel, there were daily sacrifices and offerings that were given. And the same thing is true with us as Christians. We have daily sacrifices, spiritual sacrifices that we offer up to God. They're not bulls and rams and goats, but they are certain sacrifices that we are to offer. And these are spoken about in Hebrews chapter 13, where he talks about in verse 14, he says, For here we do not have a lasting city, but we are seeking the city which is to come. Through him then let us continually offer up a sacrifice of praise to God, that is the fruit of lips that gives thanks to his name. And do not neglect to do good and sharing, for with such sacrifices God is pleased." So here you have the sacrifice of praise and the fruit of lips that gives thanks to his name. So praising God and thanking God is considered a spiritual sacrifice in a sense. And as we are going to be celebrating Thanksgiving tomorrow, it ought to be that our thanksgiving to God should be like a sacrifice, like an offering to God, an offering of thanksgiving, an offering of praise to him, as we thank him for the many blessings that we have. But this should be a daily thing. Each and every day, we should be offering up the sacrifice of praise to God, the fruit of our lips that gives thanks to his name, but also in doing good. He says, "And do not neglect doing good and sharing, for with such sacrifices God is pleased." So in our day-to-day life, as we interact with others, as we do good, as we share with others, as we are generous with others, that is a sacrifice that is well-pleasing to God. So upwards, we're praising God and thanking him. Outwardly, we're blessing others and sharing with others and pleasing God in that way. But perhaps the sacrifice that probably is the sacrifice that kind of overarches all of these sacrifices, in which these other sacrifices are contained, is described in Romans chapter 12. Starting in verse 1, where it says, "Therefore I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect." So the other sacrifice we offer up is our bodies to service to God as a living sacrifice, not a once-for-all sacrifice that you put to death and then that's it, but a living sacrifice, one in which each and every day we make a decision to put God first, to put ourselves second, to put aside the desires and the lusts of the flesh, but to live for the Spirit and to live for the things of God. This is our continual sacrifice to the Lord, putting him first, putting him above everything else. So as we read Ezekiel and we read about that holy temple that he had a vision of, and the sacrifices connected to it. And as we read about the church, which is a house being built up, a priesthood being built up, or a house being built up with a priesthood in which there are these spiritual sacrifices, let's be reminded to offer up our sacrifices to God today. The sacrifice of praise, the sacrifice of thanksgiving, the sacrifice of doing good and sharing with others, and the sacrifice of even offering up our bodies as a living sacrifice to Him. And when we do that, we are offering up offerings and sacrifices that are well-pleasing to the Lord and that give honor and glory to His name. So these are some things we can reflect on as we do our readings today. And with that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.